You'd be that old, Tim. MRCC represents independent family farmers, rural families, and their communities and citizens concerned with our food supply, our natural resources, and democracy. Tim works to organize a large membership base of farm families, rural citizens, and other Missourians like us to challenge the industrialization and corporate control of agriculture and our democratic process. Through MRCC, thousands of rural Missourians have been empowered by increased opportunities to participate in public policy formation and advocate for Missouri independent family farms and rural communities. Their mission is to preserve family farms, promote stewardship of the land and environmental integrity, and strive for economic and social justice by building unity and mutual understanding among diverse groups, both rural and urban. So this mostly urban group is thrilled to have you here. We are looking forward to learning from you what is on your mind, because the better informed we are, the better we can do our part to advocate for the right things. So thank you so much for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. I appreciate it, Sarah, and I appreciate everyone being here. I do have a slide presentation, and I'll share screen. I hope that goes smoothly. If it doesn't go smoothly, we'll just go with it. And this is going to be really informal. I've been thinking about, I've done this talk multiple times. I haven't really put much thought into it before this one, and I rarely do at times because sometimes ad hoc thinking is, I think, more interesting. But I do have notes, and I do have, a strategy of where I want to go. Like Sarah said, Missouri Rural Crisis Center is a statewide farm and rural organization. We've been around since 1985. We formed out of the farm crisis of the 80s, sort of came out of the movement of farmers organizing to stay on the farms, stay on their farms in the 80s, both on the ground organizing, but also policy formation. Like, we know that we not only need to organize on the ground, but we also need to create that power in order to create good public policy, both at the local, state, and federal levels. And one thing that we know now is that, and I think we'll see it when we talk about the 2023 Farm Bill, which is the topic of this conversation, is that in large part, a lot of our public policies, specifically in Jeff City and in Washington, D.C., aren't made via democracy. They're made via a democratic process that large part of it is controlled by special interests, lobbyists, big money, campaign contributions. It's not democracy. It's a democratic process that's controlled by special interests in large part. And we see that the ramifications of that are huge extractions of wealth, putting family farmers out of business, threatening our food supply and our food security, threatening our water and air, actually dirtying our water and air, having overarching sort of connections to our climate. But also, the thing that really pisses me off is that they are doing it by controlling our democratic process. And the purpose of a democratic process is to sort of decentralize power, as opposed to what they're using it to do, which is centralize power and centralize market access, so that they only have, they're the only players in the markets. And, Adam Smith would be the father of laissez-faire. Capitalism would be rolling over in his grave if he saw the monopolistic and oligopoly control of our food system and of lots of our industries. So that's just a little intro of what MRCC does. Our members are generally farmers and rural people, but people like you as well, people that care about our food supply, our democratic process. We also work on healthcare. So, just issues that impact rural people and rural communities in general. This is my fourth Farm Bill. I started at MRCC, like I said, in 2005. I was 25. I'm now reaching 44. And this is, it's becoming more clear to me, and I think it's becoming more clear to our movement of how they do it. Like, how do they continue the status quo nature of our policies? Like, how, and I think, unfortunately, the Farm Bill and ag policy in general is it's more clear sometimes than in other industries. It's more transparent because they just do it, and they don't care if we know how they're doing it. So, one thing that they're doing, and they're already starting it, is, it's a strategy of theirs, which is like the corporate narrative: we're going to cut food stamps. So then the group of people, and we're nonpartisan, so I'm sort of talking in different language, but a group of people are fighting for food stamps because one side is trying to cut food stamps. And, so what happens is then they compromise down so they don't cut food stamps. So what that does, and then they get all these other bad policies that they want as a compromise. But that's a strategy. They put all these bad things forward and then they compromise down to the status quo, which is bad policy, as opposed to policies that reflect the values of the vast majority of people out here, both rural and urban, both Republican and Democrat. Like what we see in this work in rural Missouri with a membership base that spans so-called political ideology is that when we come into the same room and talk about these issues, we're all shaking our heads yes, because we all know the truth when we see it. And this is the truth. So this is my fourth farm bill. We really wanted to get ahead of it this year before the drafting of the farm bill. And the farm bill hasn't been drafted yet. I'll go into some slides right now, which I guess I'll just start now, which will start sort of framing the conversation. Let me share my screen. It's going to be that one. Okay, can you see that okay?
It's coming. It says
Okay.
you've started screen sharing. There we go. Got
Okay,
it.
you got it. So I'm gonna sort of be looking off to the left because this is my screen that's gonna have this presentation is on the left, but I'm talking to y'all. So this is just some photos. We also run Patchwork Family Farms, which is a cooperative of independent hog producers. We started in 1993. And this is directly linked to farm policy. We started in 1993 because our members who raised hogs saw the writing on the wall that the market was being taken from them, was being industrialized, vertically integrated, and taken over by corporations. And we'll see what has happened. But we also, we sell pork raised by independent family farmers in Missouri. We've got between 10 and 15 producers that we work with. I say between because hog farmers historically are in and out of hogs. And then we also buy some cull cows from our members. So older cows that aren't producing anymore are ready to move on, and we make ground beef out of that. But we organize on the ground to support family farmers, and Patchwork is a program that is an alternative to the corporate model. And it shows that family farmers can get paid not only cost of production, what it costs to actually raise a product, but then a living wage on top of it, and consumers can pay a fair price. If that middle corporation isn't gobbling up all the money. See there. So this is the 2018 Farm Bill. And I just want to give a shout out to Jake Davis, who runs the root cellar here. And he also runs something called Local Root Strategies. He did a presentation with us, a webinar on the Farm Bill. I'm using some of his slides. This is one of them. This is the Farm Bill. You'll see that the largest part of the Farm Bill is nutrition, which is mostly food stamps or SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's a big thing that we'll be talking about is SNAP within this Farm Bill debate, because they're always threatening, like I said, to cut SNAP, and then they use that as a bargaining chip. But one thing, and I've learned this from Daryl Ray out of the University of Tennessee. You should look him up. He's with the Agriculture Policy Assessment Center, I think, APAC. He says SNAP is the biggest part of the Farm Bill, but the commodity policy is actually the trunk of the Farm Bill, if you see it as a tree. So SNAP is the biggest part, is the biggest branch, but the trunk is commodity policy, because that's the thing that's dictating in large part who needs SNAP. And lots of rural people need SNAP, just like urban folk, and we need it because of these policies that are extracting wealth from our communities, and rural communities' wealth in large part is based upon ag and farm, their ag and farm economies. So you'll see this is going to be the projected next 10 years of the next Farm Bill relative to the 2018 Farm Bill. So there's more money. There's going to be more money. We're going to need more money, and we're going to need to expand programs. One thing that we argue is that if we have, and I'll talk about this a little later too, if we have robust enforcement of antitrust laws, then we can have actual competition out here, and we have more decentralized control, and people will get paid more of a fair wage, and we will need less safety nets. If we enforce antitrust laws, if our government, especially at the federal level, through the Department of Justice and through the Grain Inspection Packers and Stockyards Administration. It's the GIPSA administration within USDA. It's the antitrust division within USDA, and then the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission. I'll try to describe these acronyms if I remember. Those are the sort of the three wings of antitrust enforcement. And antitrust is working to ensure that markets aren't super concentrated, like our food and agriculture markets are right now. So Farm Bill, it's a huge bill. We have this says we have 12 titles. I believe in the 2008 Farm Bill, we had 13 titles because we had a livestock title, which was really important. And I'll hopefully get to that if I remember it later on. But you'll see on the left, a lot of the titles are related to ag, but then there's other portions of the Farm Bill that aren't necessarily directly related to ag, but are more tangentially related to ag, like forestry and rural development, energy, credit, and trade. So one thing that we're arguing for in this Farm Bill, and it can be called a competition title, or this was done through a livestock title in the 2008 Farm Bill. And that's where this idea that we need to reestablish, or for the first time establish, competition in our food, ag, and livestock markets. So the Packers and Stockyards reform, which is the top bullet point, that's based upon a law that was passed in 1921 called the Packers and Stockyards Act. The purpose of that bill and that piece of legislation, along with the Clayton Act and different antitrust legislation, was to rein in monopolistic control of markets. The thing about it is it really hasn't been updated and it hasn't been enforced. So our argument right now is that it needs to be strengthened and it needs to be in robust enforcement. And the current administration right now is making some moves that they're relative to what they can do administratively in order to strengthen the Packers and Stockyards Act and strengthen antitrust. And I'll hopefully get to that as well. But we also need Congress to pass some laws to strengthen and enforce the Packers and Stockyards Act. One thing that we see, and we've seen since for entirely too long. I was talking to our executive director, Roger Allison, in 2014. He raises cattle, and prices for cattle were pretty high in 2014, and for different reasons. There was a drought, but we also had country of origin labeling, which is a piece of legislation that allows consumers to choose U.S. beef. Prices were pretty high, and I told Roger, I'm like, hey, the narrative is, cattle prices are really high, and you guys are running away with it. And he said to me, he goes, Tim, he goes, now that we're finally getting paid a fair wage, it does not mean we're running away with it. We've been underpaid for decades. And actually, the largest cattle drop in price happened in the end of 2015, early 2016. It's also a time when Congress rescinded country of origin labeling, which was a big deal. They did it at the behest of the multinational meat packers. And we saw one of the largest drop in cattle prices. And since then, cattle prices have been low. Right now, because of a drought, cattle prices are actually pretty high. But we still, just because we have every once in a while high prices, does not mean that we should have over 80% of the cattle market controlled by 4 corporations. They can control the market and vertically integrated, they can control it on different aspects of the market, so they can make money on every part of the commodity market. And family farmers are just price takers. So we need our government to stand up for us. We need to stop checkoff programs. That is a program where farmers, every time they sell a commodity, they pay a certain percentage of their sale to a checkoff board. And then that money goes to different organizations. One of the organizations that's the largest by far recipient of cattle checkoff dollars is the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, NCBA. And they are huge relative to stopping good legislation and promoting the legislation for the multinational meat packers. And then country of origin labeling, but we can jump from there. There's also there's not a labor title in the Farm Bill, but one thing that we know and that we've been doing a lot of is connecting people within the food chain, so that the narrative of it's their fault, they're different, our goal is to bring people together and say, you know what, we're really not that different. We've got a lot in common. And if we help this group of people, then we can help this group. Like if we raise the tide, we can raise all ships. And you know, the corporate narrative is one of division, disunity. You know, it's their fault because they can better control the democratic process when we're fighting amongst ourselves. Really a draconian strategy of theirs, and it's really pretty evil. This is sort of the process of what happens in the Farm Bill. This is very simplified. This is Jake's slide. I'd probably say, hey, Jake, I don't know. This one is pretty simplified, but they both committees in both the House and the Senate have a bill. They go to conference committee, and then it goes to the president. Farm bills have been vetoed in the past, so you know that can happen as well. So the Farm Bill ends on September. It's a 5-year bill, give or take. The 2012 Farm Bill passed in 2014. So that was a 7-year bill, but it's supposed to happen every 5 years. And it's September 30th, which is the end of the government's fiscal year. That's when this Farm Bill expires. So what they can do is they can pass a new Farm Bill before September 30th, which right now, and you know, don't quote, I mean, you can quote me on this, it's not going to happen. There's no way it's going to happen. They can extend it, which is what they should do. There are some programs that expire on September 30th or soon thereafter. And a lot of those programs are smaller programs that we really care about, like local food programs, community food programs. Programs like SNAP and different disaster programs do continue on. So they can extend it or it can expire. And if they expire, I mean, it's totally in the weeds what would happen if it totally expired. It would go back to the original Farm Bill of the 1930s, which came out of FDR, and parity would be paying this much for milk. That's not going to happen. So what we're thinking is going to happen is it's going to be extended, and then we're still going to be fighting. The question is the draft going to be made? When is the draft going to be made? Because there's this point where we'll still keep fighting for what we're talking about now, but there's also a point where we'll be looking in the Farm Bill and saying, hey, change this and change this and change this, you know. So there'll be some conversation and organizing around that. And then when the Farm Bill does pass, it's not over. Like, it needs to be implemented. And implementation of the Farm Bill is really, really important to how a lot of the programs that come in the Farm Bill actually function. This is the start of MRCC slide. That's Darvin. He's one of our members from Southwest Missouri. He raises Black Angus. He's a 4th-generation cattle and grain farmer. Why is this important to Missouri? Missouri has the 2nd largest number of family farms, second only to Texas, just under 100,000 family farms. And we have the 2nd largest number of cattle operations. Missouri is a really good state for cattle production, especially because of our difference in topography. Like, North Missouri is much different than South Missouri. And we've got 53,000 cattle operations, 2nd also only to Texas. We're back and forth with Oklahoma on who's 2nd on that one. Census, ag census. This is what happens when you have shit farm policy. This is what happens when you don't enforce antitrust laws. This is what happens when corporations control, you know, the production, and they can control and they can monopolize and vertically integrate and do it all or a lot of it with taxpayer dollars. Like, they are using our money to take over the marketplace. So the number of hog operations in Missouri has gone down by nearly 90%, from 23,000. Sorry, my phone keeps going off. From 23,000 to, I've got that, 2687. So we've lost nearly 90% of hog producers. That happened in one generation. And that's why we started Patchwork, because the 90s was the time when this really happened. The farmer share of the retail dollar has gone down hugely, as you see, and consumer price has gone up. So, you know, the farmers aren't making the money and consumers aren't paying less. You know, this idea of, and it came out of sort of Reagan, this change of antitrust from competition and concentration in markets, which is its original definition, to the consumer welfare standard, which allows corporations to say, hey, if we merge, then, and we merge and we merge and we merge, it's going to be good for consumers. And they can just pay somebody to make a study that says that, and then they go to the antitrust regulators, and the antitrust regulators haven't been stopping mergers. We can see in the airline industry what happens when you have mergers and mergers and mergers and lack of antitrust regulation. And it's not a shining example, and also the hog industry isn't a shining example. So they put over 20,000 Missouri hog producers out of business. They put hundreds of thousands of U.S. hog producers out of business. I believe over 300,000. That's a lot of economic development that's leaving, our rural communities. But it's not only over 20,000 hog producers. It's also thousands and thousands of businesses on rural main streets that supported independent production of hogs. And one of our goals now is to ensure that cattle production can still stay a viable option in Missouri and in our country. It's the largest sector of agriculture, and it's huge to our rural communities and economies. But it also is huge for our fight for democracy. Justice Brandeis, who was a Supreme Court justice back in the 40s, he said, you can have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, or you can have democracy, but you can't have both. And I love that statement. It's true. But if you get rid of the word wealth and put land, I think that it's equally true. You can have land concentrated in the hands of a few, or you can have democracy, but you can't have both. So this fight for independent cattle production is not only a fight for like local economies and our secure food system and, land stewardship, but it's also our fight for democracy, because we need decentralized ownership out here, and specifically decentralized ownership of land, which cattle allows people to have that. So we've lost 40,000 or 40% of our cattle producers in that same time period. And we're losing them right now because of drought in large part. I just talked to one of our cattle producers today, and he's like, yeah, cattle prices are high, but people are liquidating herds, and that's not good. And then when they're going to buy cattle back, that's going to be expensive, and that's not going to be good. So it's sort of a system to put farmers out of business, and they use catastrophic things to do that. They know what they're doing. So our Farm Bill priorities in a nutshell are to stop the public subsidizing of corporate factory farms, which are putting family farmers out of business and giving consumers less choice and extracting wealth, to break up meatpacking giants, to enforce antitrust laws, to prioritize independent processing, while also ensuring that the market is fixed, so that when we do prioritize independent processing, they also have a fighting chance to survive, because they're fighting against the JBSs of the world and the Cargills of the world and the Smithfields of the world. And then restore competition in the livestock market. So a lot of it is based upon competition. A lot of words here. I apologize for this, but it's weedy, but it makes sense. At least in my brain, it makes sense. So what do we need to do to stop subsidizing factory farms? We need to stop paying for them. We pay for them through our conservation programs, through NRCS, the National Resources Conservation Service, the conservation department within USDA. We passed a program in 1996. It was called the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP. It was a $50,000 cost share that farmers could get to enhance conservation on their land, and it was not open to CAFOs. In the 2002 Farm Bill, they opened it up to CAFOs, and it went from a $50,000 cost share to a $450,000 cost share. So what we're doing is we're paying for these industrial factory farms, corporate hog operations and poultry operations and some cattle operations, to manage their waste. So we're paying for that. One thing we need to do too is, we need to stop right now, because there's a lot of huge amounts of climate money out there, specifically within the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. We need to push that money to people that are actually conserving the land and sequestering carbon into the soil, as opposed to commoditizing the methane that comes off of these factory farms and paying them to make money off of their waste by paying for their anaerobic digesters. That's what they're trying to do. It's actually happening right now, and we need to stop that. And then one thing we need to stop, and when we've argued this in the past, and actually, they've actually back under Secretary Glickman, when he was Secretary of Agriculture under President Clinton, this actually happened once when we argued for it. Under the Obama administration, we argued for this with Vilsack, and he told us to go jump in a lake, is to stop guaranteeing loans to CAFOs. So, you know, if JBS, if you go to JBS or JBS comes to you, JBS is the biggest meat packer in the world. They're a Brazilian corporation. They're pretty much a cartel. If I want to put in a 10,000 head hog operation and I go to the bank's going to say, no, the market's way too volatile. Like, it's not a good investment for us to loan you the money to put up a 10,000 head hog operation. But then if they go to FSA, the Farm Service Agency, they get a guaranteed loan, which is backed up by taxpayers by 90%, up to over $1.5 million. And then you go back to the bank and say, hey, I've got a 90% backed up guaranteed loan from FSA. I want to put up a 10,000 head hog operation. They'll give you that operation because there's no risk for them. The only risk is for the taxpayer. So this is how and there's so many other ways that we're paying for the subsidization of corporate factory farms at the expense of farmers, rural communities, food system, our democratic process, our climate, our water and air, our values. We need to break up meat packing giants. There are two bills right now that are really good bills. They're both by Elizabeth Warren. One is an agribusiness merger moratorium, and then there's a industry-wide antitrust bill that she's put forth, which is both, and I'll just talk about both as the same. It's giving agencies the teeth to be able to look at mergers in a different way, to stop mergers, to see what the impact of past mergers have been, and then possibly go back and break up these monopolistic companies. They're both really good bills. You should look into it. She's pretty brilliant. Restore competition in livestock markets. We need to reestablish country of origin labeling in meat, specifically beef. I'm going to pass up the special investigator. That's really in the weeds. It's an investigator within USDA to look at antitrust. Require meat packers to increase cash market purchases. This is one way that they control the market. It's through what's called captive supply. So they either own the animals themselves, or they have forward contracts with producers or feedlots that allow them to play the market, so much so that now like 80% of cattle markets are controlled within captive supply, and only 20% or less are the actual cash market, which is dictating what that captive supply price is. So it behooves the meat packers to use that captive supply to drive the price down. Then within that 20%, the price is driven down, and it makes them more profits. So there are bills like by Senator Grassley from Iowa. It's called the 5014 bill. It's saying that meat packers have to buy 50% of the meat of the livestock that they slaughter off the open market, the cash market, and they can't own it for longer than 14 days before slaughter. And what that will do is diminish their use of captive supply to drive prices down. Captive supply is the next one. Packers and Stockyards Act, we've talked about that. We need to prioritize independent processing. We talked about that as well. We need to, not only fund it, but then give them a fighting chance by fixing the market. One thing that I really haven't talked about, which I will, is this is the reality of where we're at. And I'm looking at my wall because I have this printed on my wall. 4 corporations control the beef market, over 85% of the beef market. JBS, Tyson, JBS, Cargill, Marfrig, and Tyson. And JBS and Marfrig are Brazilian corporations. JBS is the biggest meat packer in the world. They also own Pilgrim's Pride Poultry, and they're number 2 in pork. 4 meat packers control 70% of the hog marketplace: Smithfield, JBS, Tyson, and Hormel. Smithfield is the biggest. JBS is just a little less than them. Smithfield is a Chinese multinational corporation. They control 25% of the market. JBS controls about 25% of the market too. So 50% of the pork industry, the US pork industry, is controlled by 2 foreign corporations. It's a big deal. It's not because we don't like foreign people. It's because the more control they get, like the less they care about us, because then it's just a commodity, and the extraction of wealth, not only from our communities, but it's out of our country. And some of these countries aren't really the most friendly with us. So we may need to think about our national security relative to this. 3/4 of corn and soybeans are controlled by 4 corporations: BASF, Bayer, which is Monsanto now, Corteva, which is Dow DuPont merger, and ChemChina and Syngenta. Both BASF and ChemChina, Syngenta, and Monsanto Bayer are foreign corporations. Now, this also is within groceries. So 69, what is that? Because there's a merger going on right now that they're trying to do between Kroger and Albertsons, which we're really trying to stop. But the Walmart, Kroger, Costco, and Albertsons control 69% of all groceries. Walmart is by far the biggest. What will happen is Kroger and Albertsons, if they merge, then they will be a direct competitor with Walmart. And that means 3 corporations will control 60% of the grocery market. Really, really big deal. Walmart is building beef packing plants out in Kansas right now. They've built one down in Texas. So like this vertical integration is even getting more vast. And what the Farm Bill does, and what it should do, is push back against that centralized power and be actually democratic. So with that, I think it's been 36 minutes. My voice sort of hurts. See if there's any questions or if this made any sense at all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now too. Thank you.
Great. No, that was a dense and wonderful information. Let's see, I'm going to scroll back up through the chat because you had a few questions that popped up. Let's see here. Kathy, you had asked him to explain what was included in the commodities section. Did that get answered in later information, or did you still have that question?
I think I still have that question.
You still have that question.
Commodities is just generally grains,
Yes.
and feed and corn and beans and milo and wheat. We're really working on that too. It's really in the weeds. Commodity policy is. One thing that we're working on is to reestablish, because it came out of original farm bills, is to reestablish supply management. Right now, prices are a little higher than they have been historically. Prices, for some reason, oftentimes go up right before farm bills. I don't know why that is, but we can guess. So what supply management will do is we'll have government and farmers sort of work together to have a price floor and a price ceiling, and then there'll be grain reserves. So farmers can sell into that grain reserve, and when the price goes above, then they let grain out. And when price goes below, they pull grain in. So it keeps that price somewhat steady. So we don't have these huge volatile markets, which are oftentimes low, low, low with some blips of highs. So that's one thing that we're working for, having farmers have non-recourse loans at the cost of production, which is like really weedy. But this is what, and this isn't new thought, like none of this is new thought. This is what farmers have been, or like independent farmers have been organizing literally for decades and generations. So what's happening now is oftentimes prices within commodity policies are low, so below cost of production. So what is necessary is that the government somehow subsidizes that. Taxpayers subsidize that. Right now, we're subsidizing it through government supported insurance programs, which are both for disaster insurance, but also for revenue insurance when revenues are low. And what that does is it keeps prices, they want us to overproduce, plant fence row to fence row. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for environment. What that does is it keep prices low so that these factory farm corporations and these other processing high fructose corn processing corporations can buy their products. For factory farms, it's feed. For high fructose corn, it's corn syrup. It's so they can buy them below cost of production. That's their goal, and then the taxpayers make up for it. We're not opposed to getting rid of subsidies. We're opposed to making a system so we don't need subsidies anymore, or don't need the same kind of subsidization we have right now. We are totally in favor of insurance for disaster, but revenue insurance should instead be based upon a supply management system where the price of commodities is paid for through the market from the buyer, not from the government, so that they can get below cost of production products and commodities.
Dave Taylor, you may have answered this later. He commented fewer hog farmers, but not fewer hogs. How many hog CAFOs are now in the state?
We've been pretty steady around 500. Iowa's got over 10,000. The reason why we only have 500 is because of, the organization I work with for decades have been fighting for local control, the ability of local counties to pass health ordinances, which the industry likes to claim like the sky's falling. These things are just big government. These county commissioners in rural Missouri are just like these big government, their narrative is ridiculous. What these health ordinances did was increase setbacks from hog operations in people's houses, from hog operations in public water sources and public use areas. It created setbacks relative to the spreading of waste from water. And what that did is, if there was the threat of local farmers going to their county commissioner saying, hey, we need to protect ourselves against this JBS Smithfield or Pipestone operation, that kept CAFOs out of Missouri in large part. Unfortunately, in 2019, the legislature passed Senate Bill 391. We fought this since the early 2000s and we won. But 2019, even though we had over 10,000 people take action, make phone calls, come to the Capitol, send emails, like we ran a huge campaign. Everybody was for local control, except for the powers that be in our Capitol building and our governor. And they got rid of local control in 2019. The Supreme Court, our members took it to the Supreme Court. They just ruled that it was constitutional. So they got rid of our local control. It's a big deal.
I remember working on that when we were knocking doors in 2019. I remember that being part of our messaging.
A really big deal. And we're still going to be fighting for the ability. We fight. Not the problem is this is the corporate narrative in our capital, and the politicians use it. We're coming in line with federal standards. Sounds not bad, right? What federal standards are the baseline, the most least amount of regulation you can have. And what we're supposed to do is states are supposed to build upon that. Well, what we've done is gone down to that lowest common denominator. And that has threatening, our water, our air, our property rights, our property values. We've seen what has happened in Iowa when they got rid of local control, and there's just a influx of corporate factory farms. They've got horrible water problems out there. You drive through Iowa and you smell corporate hogs. It's not good. But what we have here, luckily, is a group like MRCC that helps people organize. Even if we don't have the ability to pass health ordinances, we can still fight like hell to stop these operations from moving in next to our farms and communities.
Yeah. Pam, I think your hand has been up the longest, so I'm going to call on you first and then we'll go to her.
I have several questions, but I could stop with one. When does the ag bill, when does it expire, and then we have to get a new one?
The farm bill,
Yeah.
It expires September 30th of 2023.
Okay. Carolyn Amprin asked if it would help to contact Mark Alford because he's on the ag committee.
We had a meeting with Mark Alford. It didn't go.
How'd that go?
I don't know. I don't really think he knows what he's talking about. When I talked to his ag legislative assistant with our farmer members, we're there in DC. This was 3 or 4 weeks ago. We went through a bunch of this stuff of what we need to do to save cattle producers and save our rural communities and bring wealth back to our rural communities and decentralize our food. Everything I'm talking about here. And they pretty much said they're doing none of that. And I said, well, what are you doing? And they said, we want to, they're also opposed to country of origin labeling. They said that explicitly. But I said, what are you doing in the farm bill? And they said, pretty much, we want to get rid of CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program. What the Conservation Reserve Program is they said, we want to stop forcing farmers to take their land out of production. Conservation Reserve Program is a voluntary program that farmers contract with the government to take their land out of production agriculture. They do it lots of times because it's land that isn't suited to be planted on, a highly erodible land. It also is a big part of supply management to take, you know, land out of production and get paid some money for that, to then and also grow the environment within that land. But then it takes that out and then it lowers the supply so that we can have more fair prices. Contact Mark Alford. Yes. I just want to let you know where he's at. And I've heard him talk at some of the ag appropriations committees and ag committees, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just a talking head. But it doesn't mean we can't educate him and let him know at least what his staff, his DC ag staff is saying is wrong. And the vast majority of people out here disagree with it, both Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Progressive. It's wrong on all.
And he
fronts.
does have an office in Columbia.
Does he?
Yeah.
I don't even know what this guy looks like, and he's my rep. I've never met him. He's never come to an event.
I haven't either, but it,
But,
I'm
you know,
trying-
I don't know if 60 or 70 phone calls / emails from a bunch of irritated Boone Countyans between now and September 1st might nudge him. I don't know.
right.
I mean, he does need us to vote for him
Um,
at some point.
Lucas Kuntz he's a part of a nonprofit who works against monopolies. Do you all?
The American Economic Liberties Project. They're a good group.
Okay.
Let's see. Herb, I promised I'd let you go next. Do you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Tim, thank you very much for coming before us today. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
I endorse and have endorsed in the past your organization, and I'm delighted to see you working with it. You're doing good work.
Thank you. You're a good member. We appreciate
What I
it.
wonder if you would do for this group is to share with people a few numbers and portraying the farm population in Missouri, which has changed a lot, but I don't think many people realize how very few full-time farms there are by Department of Agriculture definition, and how few of the farmers. Apparently there's a slight increase in the number of so-called now very small farms, but I don't know how many that is. But those are sidelights. And the number of mid-sized farms, I don't even know that, but I know it's declining. Could you sort of picture this for us? Because I think most of us don't have daily contact
Well,
with
but
it.
aren't the farmers market though helping some of the ones that are small farms, but that are food oriented and making it, I mean,
Yeah, no, farmers markets are great. Local food is a piece of the pie. It's not going to solve our problem. We
I know
can't local food our way out of this situation. Farmers markets are sort of based upon, you know, farmers growing for farmers markets are based. I'm looking at a map of Missouri above me right now, big one. And, you know, I'm looking, farmers markets need people, like generally larger groups of people to have that, you know, like Columbia or St. Louis or Kansas City, Springfield. But, you know, a lot of our members in Sullivan, Schuyler, Scotland, I mean, like it's hard to make a go at it local food wise if you're a farmer up there. Herb, I don't know those, like off the top of my head, I don't have the answers to those questions, except for just sort of generally speaking. The amount of full-time farmers in Missouri, like I said, I don't have that number, but I know that the vast majority of the 50,000 cattle producers that produce in Missouri, they've got off-farm jobs. You know, most farmers out here have off-farm jobs, not only to make a living, but also to get health care. So, you know, there's lots of reasons why they have off-farm jobs. What you have to see is the average age of the farmer is just creeping up. And that's why the result of that is that there is going to be a huge amount of transfer of land over the next 10, 20 years, which is why we need to fix the market. one of our members down in Southwest Missouri told me, he's like, I told my kids not to come back to the farm because there's no living. So it's hard. The work's hard as hell, and you barely get by. And he calls himself a mailbox watcher because he, you know, the way he gets paid lots of times is through a check through the mail that's coming from the government. You know, it's just no fun for him anymore, and he doesn't want his kids to go through it, and he doesn't see the future being bright. I do have hope that the future can be bright if our elected representatives and our policies change that. Now, and I talked about this before, but I'm just going to reiterate, we need diverse ownership of land out here for lots and lots of reasons, but for the biggest reason of fighting for democracy, you know, fighting for representation. So no, Herb, you're right, and it's because of these status quo shit farm bills that are written for corporations by corporations that are extracting huge amounts of wealth. We not only know how we got here, why we got here. It wasn't inevitable. It's not because they're more efficient. It's because they wrote the rules, and they wrote the rules for themselves. And that's what we're doing is organizing our members who are farmers and independent livestock producers, because we know that. We not only know what the problem is, we know what the solution is. The solution is robust antitrust enforcement, supply management, ensuring that farmers get paid a cost of production and a living wage. So I know that doesn't directly answer your question, but that's the best I could do right now.
Can I quickly follow up? Department of Agriculture traditionally defines a full-time farmer on the basis of gross. Does the farm sell enough to fully support a family? And I think the number in Missouri is less than 3,000 left, and they're getting bigger. The number is shocking.
So we've got nearly 100,000 family farmers, and 3,000 of them are defined as full-time farmers based upon the number you're seeing.
And the other thing that I will say, I worked in Jeff City from 74 to 2008. So many of the women that worked in our office, they were the ones bringing in the steady income and the insurance. And they felt they had to work to get that.
Yeah, well, bless you for working there for that long. I mean, the institutional knowledge in that building generally comes from the people that have been working there for decades. Term limits have really been bad for our policies at the state level. It's a perfect storm, and we were really opposed to term limits.
Right.
Before I lose track of it, I was going to go back over to the chat. Carolyn asked, is there a way to get around the international trade issues with country of origin labeling? She recalls even Canada was in the group that were going to sue or did sue in the international trade courts. I support the labeling, but I understand the international trade implications too.
Yeah, it's the World Trade Organization. You know, they're unelected corporate bureaucrats that Canada and Mexico went to under NAFTA. They went to the World Trade Organization and said, us requiring that the meat that's in our grocery store shelves says where it comes from was an illegal trade barrier. USDA actually then rewrote the rules, and then Congress in 2015 actually rescinded country of origin labeling. It came out of our 2008 Farm Bill. Canada and Mexico did that at the behest of corporate agriculture and the multinational meat packers and meat traders. What we need to talk about too is, I've got the numbers right here. In 2022, we imported 3.4 billion pounds of beef. 3.4 billion pounds of boxed beef. That's how much beef that undercuts US family farmers. And the one thing that allows them to do that is lack of country of origin labeling. We imported 1.6 million live cattle, mostly from Mexico and Canada. They don't have to say where that came from. That undercuts US cattle producers. So there's a reason why they don't want country of origin labeling. Our free trade agreements, like NAFTA, which is now the USMCA, the US-Mexico free trade agreement, are corporate trade agreements that not only allow them to globalize price, buy meat wherever in the world they can, and sell it for as much as they can everywhere else, put farmers out of business all over this world. When we talk about immigration in this country, we rarely talk about NAFTA and CAFTA and our free trade agreements that are doing the same thing to family farmers in other countries. When we dumped subsidized GMO corn on the Mexican marketplace, put 1 million Mexican corn farmers out of business. So who wants to leave their home to come to try to make money and send money home? That doesn't make any sense. There's a reason why they're doing it. And in large part, it's because of US trade policy. So I'm a little ramped up about that because it really makes me angry. But no, there's a reason why they don't want cool, and they're using the World Trade Organization as a pawn within that system.
Interesting. Dave Rathel, you say you've got the number, you've looked up the numbers we were.
Yeah,
looking
no, I didn't look them up. I'll tell you what I did. I've been going to various events, learning things. I attended something put on by the Boone County Water Commission, and I showed up. There was 2 farmers and me, outnumbered by the presenters. And I asked a question about like this. Near as I can tell, there are about 500 official farmers in Boone County. I mean, somebody who's claiming an income from an LLC or putting it on a Schedule C, right? And I said, yeah, that sounds about right. And I said, but as near as I can tell, there's only about 50 who claimed an income more than half of the household income. See, the number I always learn is that a full-time, a real farmer is someone whose income is 50% plus a penny more than their off-time job. And they said, that sounds about right. And then, you know, some more talking went on, and they pointed out, but paradoxically, if you look at the numbers, the GDP of Boone County, 52% of that comes out of agriculture. So that means you've got 50 pretty good sized farms making a whole lot of money. All right. The other thing I want to jump onto real quick is ranting about Chapter 100 bonds and how they are connected to these kinds of issues. Every time the article in the newspaper says Swift is sourcing their hogs from Missouri, I call or ask the reporter for email where. I never get an answer. I've asked Tim if he can find out where those hogs in Missouri are allegedly coming from. One article said they're coming out of Centralia. Near as I can tell, they're coming out of the JBS facility, which means they're coming out of Brazil.
Or
So
Ottumwa.
Missourians and
Dave, they could be coming out of Ottumwa, Iowa. There's a big JBS facility up
Okay.
there.
Okay.
And also,
the point is they're not Missouri hogs.
you know, this is what happened with JBS. You know, they're processed, a lot of them are processed in Ottumwa. Missouri MFA had hog barns, right? Missouri Farmers Association also owns Break Time. I mean, I don't know how they're connected, but I don't know how connected. MFA hogs got bought out by Cargill, the Cargill pork sector. Cargill pork got bought out by JBS. So when some Cargill operators thought they were working for a U.S. corporation, they got bought out by JBS. PSF, which is 100,000 hogs in North Missouri, Premium Standard Farms, they got bought out by Smithfield. Smithfield got bought out by Shineway, the WH group. So this consolidation, and this not only food, we need to think energy as well.
Yeah.
Like when we get this consolidation and these big boys like controlling our food and controlling our energy, and then a foreign entity buys it, and we don't have any teeth to stop it, that's a big deal. And we need to have safeguards in order to stop that. But Dave, I know that's not directly what you're talking about, but they may be coming out of Missouri operations, going to Ottumwa, and then coming down to the Swift operation.
Okay, and gathering intelligence itself is hard, and the people who have that intelligence don't want us to have access to it. That's why you're reading about proposals to apparently people are interfering with hog deliveries up around Chillicothe. Legislatures want to make it a felony, not a misdemeanor. I mean, there's some hostile feelings out there, because people feel they're being lied to. They know they're being lied to.
They've made the rules so much so that this EQIP program that I was talking about, we don't know who gets it, what they get it for. We can't. That's all behind closed doors. The guaranteed loan program, our CAFOs get that money, really can't tell us. I mean, it's all behind. They make these policies not only so they get the money, but we don't know that they're getting the money. It's really
Right.
intentional.
This is an easy one. Dave Taylor asked, is there a list of restaurants or stores in our area that carry Patchwork Farm products? Is that on their website maybe?
Yeah, it's on our Patchwork website. And it does remind me, I do want to put in the comments some way you can take action.
Yes,
And this
please.
also just allows us to stay in touch with you.
Yep.
These are just some petitions of issues that we're working on, from country of origin labeling to the Packers and Stockyards rules. One thing I do want to talk about, which is really important relative to Packers and Stockyards, is so Biden in July 2021 issued an executive order on competition and concentration in markets. It's agriculture is a big part of that, and it's actually a win for us. It's what we've been talking about for decades. So when it came out, we're like, hell yeah, but now we need to make them do it. His administration is doing some things. They're passing 3 different rules through the Packers and Stockyards administration within USDA. Really weedy stuff, but it's all about antitrust and fairness for farmers. Well, out of the House just came a House Ag Appropriations bill that is attempting to defund the Packers and Stockyards administration and stop them from doing these rules, because the Packers don't like these rules. So a proposal is going to come out of the Senate. It's going to go to conference. The Senate is where the game is played, and the conference is where the game is played. So when you sign that petition, you're also going to be getting action alerts from us about how you can take action to like stop not only that in particular, but issues like that in general.
That's great. This is related. Carolyn has a great question. She points out that the Boone County Commissioners are starting to work on their master plan for the county. Without a health ordinance, are there policies we can ask for inclusion that would help stop CAFOs in Boone County? She wants to also know for the Sierra Club stakeholder input that they get to do.
Yeah, I'm Dave. I see that there's a lot of chats. I have my brain isn't allowing me to like look at them.
Yeah.
Sarah, you're doing a great job facilitating. Thank you. One thing that we learned, because there was a couple years ago, the county commission was talking about this, and what I learned, and I've got our zoning regulations over there, all marked up. The Boone County regulations on CAFOs pretty much say the same, just do what the DNR says. And the DNR rules, like I said, are the lowest common denominator. So when they took, and this is a good question, Sarah and Carolyn, when they took local control away, they took it away from rural counties, because the only way that rural counties, which is 94 of our counties, they're considered what by definition is called third-class counties. Those counties can't plan and zone agriculture. So the only way that they could create protections from CAFOs is through health ordinances. Boone County is a first-class county. We can plan and zone agriculture. So through this process of planning and zoning, we can create protections for Boone Countyans to protect ourselves from industrial livestock operations. We should have a further conversation about that some other time.
And it's my understanding that they're going to be working on this for a number of months. So fortunately, it's not urgent, but probably be good to get a bug in their ear early on before they get too far down the road and make sure.
I can help you however you want on that, because
Well,
we've
Chip is
sort of gone
coming
down
to
that
talk
road.
to us next week. Do you want to come back next Friday?
Next Friday, I'm going to be in New Orleans.
Oh,
So
well,
no way. no
okay.
how.
If I
That's
could
all
just
related.
add, Tim, Sierra Club has been invited to provide input on July 10th. So, and I don't know how many times we'll get an opportunity to provide input in a small meeting. So if I could connect with you before then.
Yeah, send me
That
an
would be
email,
great.
Carolyn. That'd be great.
Okay,
I'm planning on being here July 10th.
okay.
Let's see what else. Oh, Pam, you've got your hand up. Why don't you do that?
Actually,
I'll start looking at the chat.
I think I may have had my question answered. I was going to ask if Secretary Vilsack was supportive, and it sounds like they're trying to be.
That's hard to comment on.
Okay.
He hasn't been supportive in the past, and we're hoping that he's going to be supportive in the future. Generally.
Alice Turner asks, in Europe, a lot of farmers are using wind power. Are our Missouri farmers using new opportunities in Biden's energy bill to use renewable energy? Are you seeing an uptick in that at all?
I'm not really seeing enough. I mean, my brain doesn't really go there. There's a lot of money though. I mean, this IRA money, it's like billions and billions and billions of dollars. So what we need to do is, not only within food and agriculture, but also with energy, we need decentralized energy. And so ideally, we need to lobby our government to make sure this big money goes to the right places.
It is a little bit after 1 o'clock, I noticed. I think we've pretty much caught up with everything in the chat. Correct me if I missed you. If you have something over there, just poke me and it's not too late to get it in real quick. Dave Taylor posted the Patchwork Farms direct
Thank you,
link. Right above that is Tim's link to sign up for the RCC action alerts. I don't know if you all know this trick, but if you have your chat open, and if you go to the very, very, very bottom, there's like a pencil, a box, a smile, and 3 dots on the left-hand bottom corner. If you hover over those 3 dots and click on them, it's more. And the option that comes up is save chat. And it'll take this entire chat and save it on your computer as a text file. And then you can go back and copy and paste from it. And you can also click those links later. And
Thank you. I didn't even know that, Sarah. That's great.
Yeah, there you go. So if you want to save these links right now, that's you could do it now, and it's just going to create a text file somewhere on your computer. I try to do it when the chat's especially meaty like this, so that we have it to go along with the video. So that's just a little bonus trick we learned today. Dave, I see your hand. Pam, is your hand still really up, or is that okay? Why don't you go ahead and then we'll let Dave go, and then we probably need to let Tim get back to his lunch or whatever he needed to do.
I just remember that when this CAFO issue came up before, Dan Atwell said, "Oh, we won't have any in Boone County because our land is too expensive." So I want your comment on that.
Land is expensive everywhere. I mean,
yeah. Okay.
That's not good enough. If Pipestone right now, some of these operations are buying 20 acres.
Yeah,
Put 10,000 hogs on 20 acres. They can afford that, even if it's in Boone County.
Yep. Doesn't take much to make a big old hot mess. Dave, what do you want to ask?
If anyone didn't get to catch the 5-part series the Missourian ran on the effects of fertilizer, I put that in the link here. I'm just going to point out again at the same event that where I'm getting numbers on farms. It is the contradiction. Farmers insist they don't use any more than they have to because the stuff is so expensive, and regardless, it's killing the ocean. And the whole point is it's connected to the demand for overproduction. I, for one, don't understand why this is so hard for people to see. Thank you.
Mary Jo, do you have
why do Missouri family farmers continue to vote Republican when Democrats are much more likely to side with our issues? And is there anything that we should be doing about this?
Thank you. I missed that one. I saw it and it just, see, I'm not doing that great of a job, Tim. I dropped the ball on that one. And that's for this group, that's a really interesting question, because a lot of times that's what we sit around and scratch our head about. It's like, how do we message to those rural voters, get them out of their chairs to the ballot box on our
We're
issue?
Nonpartisan, 501c3.
Oh, so you're not allowed to say.
All I can say is that if you go out and listen to people first, don't go out there and tell them stuff. Go out there and listen to them, and then try to address what's going on in their lives. Tell them the truth, make relationships. I think that's much more valuable. I think that's the value of what we do. And I think we have a lot more in common than we have in opposition to each other. I think there's a corporate narrative that's actually dividing us. And I think there's an illusion of choice. No offense, there's an illusion of choice. This is a system problem. So this isn't a Democrat-Republican problem. This is a system problem. So within the bounds of what I think I can talk about, that would be my.
Thanks. I didn't mean, you're right. I didn't mean to put you in an uncomfortable position. Plug your ears. So as we were talking about earlier, group, not Tim.
I can hear, I can listen to it. I can listen
Mark
to it.
Alford's our rep. I've never seen him. And apparently he's not friendly to these things. So that's something we need to work on. He's a Democrat, right? I mean, he was
he's a
our only
Republican.
choice on the ballot last time. Just food for thought, Dems. Yeah.
No, Alford, did you say Alford's a Democrat?
No, he's not.
No.
Oh,
he's
is he not? I thought he
No.
was did he run unopposed? Is that what I'm thinking of? Did he run out of, he was unopposed, so I didn't.
No, I think he had a primary.
Well, I should say he did have a primary candidate,
Oh,
but
well.
not,
But he
well,
didn't
and there
have
was
a
even,
Democratic
there was,
opponent.
The
there was a
Democrat didn't do
Democrat,
anything.
but he was not he was not really running a campaign and
And
he
on
was.
Democrats
just
did not.
a
Oh,
general
I think I
candidate.
do remember
Yeah,
that.
Margie.
Who are you talking about? I didn't get the name.
Mark Alford, who is the Senate District 4. I think that's like more north of town, like where I am. He's
I am
my-
in the fourth, yes.
It's
Senator.
House district, but it goes down, it's Vicky Hartzler's old district that has been redistricted, but it goes pretty, it's part of Boone County and then goes down southwest Missouri.
Okay, it grabs me for some reason.
Me
But
too.
yeah, we didn't
I'm-
have
I'm
a
a
strong
member. I'm a
Democratic candidate.
constituent as
We
well.
need one.
Yeah, let's be thinking about it. All right, Tim, thank you so much. I've learned so much. This has been great. I could tell from the quality of the questions in the chat, you really brought up a lot of stuff that we've been thinking about or needed to know more about. So this has just been really a rich discussion. We're recording it. We put it on our website. We push that out. So people who can't make the noon thing will come back and watch it. So this
Oh,
will
good.
continue
People need to
that
hear me
reach.
rant. People need to
Oh.
hear me rant.
People need to hear you rant on the video.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I think with that, we're going to let Tim get back to his life. You're welcome to stay. We're going to do just a little bit of business and some announcements here. You're welcome to stay, but I know you've got important world saving stuff to do too. So
We appreciate, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate you. And if there's anything you need from me in the future, don't hesitate to reach out.
great. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, y'all. Love you. Bye-bye.
He loves us.